Hey there, Vernacular Faithful. Redcoat here. And I was moving some things around in the house, trying to get stuff ready for the winter months. And I was listening to a podcast, and it hit me with something that I wanted to actually comment on. So the podcast, well, not the podcast, I guess it was like a YouTube video, cast. I mean, I listen to them like they're casts, so it is what it is. It was Cole Hastings. He has a whole channel, and he does a lot of interesting insights and views on the way of the world and things. His stuff's very well produced, and I think he does a good job of it. But one thing that he was commenting on was the idea of subscriptions and how that's fed into people being unable to live properly. Specifically, the idea, and he actually goes into the whole history of it and everything. I'm not going to do that. Uh, I'll have a link in the description below to go to that video. I suggest you watch it. I think it's really good. But I digress. It was something that I ran into while I was working trying to get started as a game developer, because the one of the things, this was during like the 2000s and such, when I was still of the mindset that going to university, going to college was actually a worthwhile thing. I hadn't been disabused of that idea yet, and so while I was at college, it was the DigiPen Institute of Technology, and I was running into a number of people who were gearing up to go into the greater industry, and they were learning they were learning a lot of fundamentals, like particularly on the artist side, they were learning a lot of fundamentals of how to draw and everything. And on the programming side, they were learning basic coding languages and general logic. But it was an interesting thing when I stepped out of there and went to make my own video game business, and this was while doing a whole bunch of other things. I ran into a particular issue on the artist side that I thought was of interest, and this does play into that whole subscription idea, which is specifically the Adobe suite and the how would I put it? It's the tethering of one's skills to a particular tool. And it's interesting because a lot of these artists, they were people that had either met while I was at DigiPen, or people that I would run into while I was in the testing fields, because of course they went out to get a job, but they didn't have the experience, so they ended up in the testing trenches. And I would offer them a chance to build a game with me. And the thing was, when we were with the first game that we were making, we were doing it entirely from scratch. So like the coders that I had were people that they specifically were trained in the language of C and C++, but they had enough functional knowledge to be able to step into Linux, step into Python, step into F# if necessary. And so we had our modus operandi in the idea that we would pivot the code base that we were using to the thing that we were doing. So if we felt that the code base was actually more suited to doing a thing, then we'd move in that direction. And when it came to the art side of stuff, that I was in a position where I was like, okay, if I'm going to have my art team here, I need them to be like, I can't put too much money into it. And so I was genuinely just straight up averse to any subscription, anything, because I was already taking care of all of my own expenses. If the artist was coming, it was either bring your own program, or we'll co-buy a program. But I wasn't going to be footing the bill on a subscription for 30 seats or 15 seats over the course of a couple months, when I myself was bootstrapping the whole thing off of a tester's salary, mind you. So I had a couple artists who would come on and like, well, yeah, I know how to do art, but I can only do it in Adobe, or I can only do it with Maya. And I was like, well, can't we? There's some free software out there, there's Krita or Blender. Why don't you guys try and learn that? Like, no, I can't. And it's like, well, I can't afford to purchase Maya for you, and I can't do the subscription either. So, what do you have a copy of it yourself? Like, no, I'm working off. I was working off of the student version in the university, and I would have to pirate my special version. I was like, well, I mean, I guess I guess if that's what you need to do, do it. But you should be learning how to acclimatize to new systems, or at least pick up a system that you're not going to lose. Because the other part of it, this was early on in the whole subscription space, so prices were actually relatively low, because that's how these things work. They kind of depend on the consumers not having a sense of the how it's going to go in the extra years. They give you a initial low price that they're probably getting a loss on, knowing that once they get their user base in, they'll be trained and they'll be dependent, which means that when a better deal appears, they will be less likely to go to it. And in actuality, it's a pretty high likelihood that because of the effort involved in learning a new system, finding a better tool, and all of that jazz, and most of them would stick around. So that was the thing I ran into with a lot of artists, was just, yeah, I could do this, but I can only do it on this super expensive thing, because the university trained me on this super expensive thing, because that was industry standard. And while I understand there's the logic there of, like, in the greater industry, everyone uses the expensive thing, but I think there's a false logic there in the fact that, well, I mean, you're using it because everyone else does, rather than because it's the best thing for what you're trying to do. I think making sure that you understand why you're making a choice and committing to it, I think that's important. Because a few years would pass where because of those limitations, we had to make sure that we were only working with specific things. I myself was just working with Paint.net to do pixel art and everything, because that was free. It was free, and I could get all the extensions wherever I needed to. And incidentally, I know they do operate off of donations. So if you feel so inclined, you can go ahead and donate to that. But I mean, there's a number of different crowdsourced programs out there for doing development, and people are way more aware of them now, at least in the independent circles. But this is a general thing with that whole deal. And so the main bit that I wanted to comment on when talking about this idea of the subscription service tools, and the fact that they're just, at least in my opinion, it's just a bad idea to attach yourself to them, because I mean, the first thing is, like I said before, it's like you become you are no longer versatile. You're not able to jump off the tool if it's no longer working for what you need it to do. But also, you are constrained to the people that own it. And so if they decide to raise the price, and you've made your livelihood based off of working with this tool, then you are stuck with whatever price point they give you. And that's a pretty big issue, at least in my opinion. And so again, when I was working with people, I would say, we've got Krita, we've got Blender. When we're looking at the engine side of things, there's Godot. Uh, there's Godot and a couple of other. I mean, there's a number of different engines that you can work with for free. Although it's free until you're successful. Is how it works. Where once you get to the point where you can make money off of whatever it is that you're working with them, then you start paying money. And so you have to pay attention to those contracts, because that was something that Unity kind of tried to screw people over with. I believe that whole thing got reversed, but it's still a bit, because with any of these engines, again, it is that fact that at the end of the day, you don't necessarily own it unless you fully downloaded it, or you got it somewhere. Now, the nice bit is that with the age of the internet, it's very easy to get a hold of things, and most users are savvy enough and aware enough that the purveyors of these tools kind of have to set it up so that you can get your replacements off of whatever website they have. But that's still the issue, is if you're trading out permanent ownership of a particular tool, one of the other things that you do lose also is an element of predictable stability. Now, what I mean by that is, with the current culture surrounding any particular active tools, there is usually a high chance that whatever version of the tool that you're using is going to change in a month. And it's going to change in the month afterward, and it's going to change in the month afterward, and it's going to change in the month afterward. Some internal workings of that tool are going to shift. And if you understand that tool intimately, you're going to be dependent on how its inner workings work. So if that inner working is changing every month, there's this instability that comes with that. We're like, well, did they break the thing this month? Did they break the thing this month? Did they break it this month? And that was my issue that I had with Windows. It's an issue I think a lot of people have with Windows over the years. And I mean, now we've just kind of been inculcated to it. Where it's like, well, it's the only super recognizable thing on the market. But it's still an issue, in my opinion, that every day a new update could come up that'll make it so that your computer just stops working. And in fact, some would say that it's designed to do that. Planned obsolescence and all of that. And that's to say nothing of the building practices with Apple, and I mean even the Windows phones. I mean, I worked as a Windows Phone librarian, so I know how the innards of those things are constructed, and they're not made for you to be able to fix them. They're made to break so that they can bring it back to the internals and everything like that. And I think Apple even more so. But that's the thing, and I suppose that's another guy that I need to get the link to. Trying to remember what his name is, but he's a big proponent of right to repair. I'm trying to remember what his name is, but I will find that at some point. And let me see if I can just find it right now. Yeah, Louis RossMann. That's another really important guy. If you haven't heard of him, you should look him up, because he's going to be really relevant in the coming years, particularly because he actually started a little movement that was for talking not specifically about the phone stuff, because he was actually trying to get legislation pushed through to fix that for several years. But right now, what he's doing is creating a wiki that contains that's going to contain all of the information in EULAs. Why is this important? So the EULA is essentially whenever you're told to sign a thing, and you just kind of scroll through the pages, hundreds and hundreds of pages of law jargon, and you just get to the thing and you go sign. That's a EULA. And I mean, there are other terms for these things, but it's basically the agreement that says, because you own this, you agree to this. And that whole thing of scrolling through it and you not reading it, that's by design. It's a huge word salad, but inside of that word salad will be things that take away certain inalienable rights, such as your ability to resell the thing, your ability to the ability to hold on to any data that you have with it, their ability to actually watch you through your camera. Like, that's the thing. in certain deals, there will be that sort of deal. Like, there's a whole bunch of different deals in these EULAs that, because of the way that they're structured and because of the lawyer ease that they're written in, the average consumer will never know about, but they will be legally bound to by their signature. Now, by that same token, I had a different video talking about the fact that rules aren't real. They are just it's whether or not they're enforced societally. But the fact of the matter is that because they have the backing of the legal institutions that allow them to write these predatory agreements in the way that they are, that means that you're in a rock and a hard place if you've ever signed any of these things. It's to the point where if you went on Facebook, they have all of your they have not only your email information, but they have the email information of anybody that was in your contact list, because you actually gave them access to that contact list by agreeing to the user agreement at the start of your time with Facebook. And the same is true of a lot of social media platforms. Pretty much the biggies, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Meta on the whole, even though Meta basically owns Instagram and Facebook at the same time, amongst other things. Even general stuff that you work with on the daily, such as elements of Google, will have elements in their agreements that say, well, yes, this is your information, and you have your right to your privacy, but those rights are waived with this agreement. And so you've legally done it, but you've done it unknowingly. Which begs the question of whether or not it's actually legal at that point, because you've essentially had the rug pulled out from under you. So that's why Louis RossMann's wiki is so important. And it's a crowdsourced thing, and I would highly recommend that. I mean, if you're the type of person that actually reads those, and I used to live with a guy who did that, which is why I'm even familiar with this sort of thing, I would say go contribute, because even if it's the EULA for a vacuum cleaner, and you found something that says, well, in actuality, we should repair these, but we're not gonna, and you agreed to this in the EULA. That would be a thing. Although for Louis RossMann's one, it's not for vacuum cleaners and that stuff. It's specifically for tech. It's specifically for subscription services and phones and right to repair and all that stuff. There are other platforms for doing that with physical items, but for Louis RossMann's, it's specifically tech related stuff. And to know what kind of things you will want to be looking for to actually submit, you can check out his channel. He's got so many videos just about this sort of thing. And so you can get a sense of what it would be that he'd be looking for. But I digress. Anyway, I went off on a little tangent there. But yeah, two people there. So that's Louis RossMann, which I think is very important, and also Cole Hastings. Cole Hastings for the philosophical elements and everything there, and Louis RossMann he's a fun guy to watch, but also he has a lot of insight with regards to how tech works and how you have been unknowingly screwed by them over and over and over again. And it's if you don't know, you should know, and you should watch. But I digress. This was one last tangent before I close out this. This was a thing that I was trying to do many moons ago. Was I was trying to investigate how to get a phone that actually has right to repair functionality. So something that works like cars used to work, because cars don't work like this anymore. Um, which is you have we originally you had a car and you had an owner's manual, and so in that manual it told you all of the individual parts that were in your car. It told you how to fix it, and so if you had the tools and you had the gear and you were willing to, you could fix the car on your own, and you could buy the replacement parts. Because they were making them on the regular, and this was a part of the monetary value for a car, where the the builder of the car didn't just make money off of you buying the car, but they also made money off of you upkeeping the car and buying parts for the car. Nowadays, it's the deal of where, with all of the, and I think this is tech influence, honestly, and nowadays, a lot of parts for old cars that are just no longer made. It's to the point where you actually need to speak with people that do 3D printing to get replicas of them made, which can be done. It can be done. It's just the material might be of a lower quality, or it might not be the exact type of material that you need. But this is a thing. People come up with solutions for this sort of deal, so that is a thing. If a part is missing, you might be able to find somebody with a CNC machine or some other thing that is capable of building the part out of the right kind of material. But I digress. The same is not true when you're looking at your smartphones. Like, you have people that can do 3D printing of custom shells for your phone, which is nice because all of the older models, they don't really have support for particular they don't have particular support for otter boxes or other things to protect your phones. But the aspect of what's on the inside, that is not easily accessible. And the funny thing was, when I was investigating this, I was like, okay, so the first question I asked was, is anyone actually doing this? Is anyone actually making phones that you can take parts out and put parts back in? Because would essentially be a custom phone. And the answer was yes. In Germany, there was a company that was building that, and I reached out to them and was like, hey, I think there's a market here in America for that. If you brought that over here, and they're like, no, bro, we're not going over there. And I think there were two reasons for that. I mean, one of them was I had my own company at the time, and I was working in the tech space. However, I was a little guy. I was a nothing burger. There's like, who the hell are you? But also, there was the angle that just from the standpoint of them entering into the American market, that would suddenly put them smack dab in front of Apple and Microsoft. And that's like Apple and Microsoft would be like, they do everything they could legally to keep them out of the market. And I mean, a part of that also is just, there's probably some weird legalese with just how, because I suspect there are some things with just regioning that you would have to go through that muck things up. But I was talking to them about that, and it's like, yeah, it turns out that there are companies that are already doing these, and low key, well, maybe high key. What I wanted to do was just when they said they couldn't come over, I was like, okay, bet. I'll just buy one and reverse engineer it, and then I'll make my own with unique changes, of course, so that it is sufficiently distinct. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some legal restriction there. But that was the thought that came to mind. But nothing that didn't ever come together. I had people that were in Europe that were actually in a position to go and pick it up, but they never actually did, it was unfortunate. I was right there. I was right there. I had the people to research it and everything. But I digress. That's a thing. There's also computers, laptops that are built in that same way, that have interchangeable parts, interchangeable laptops, I should say, that are built that way. Tower computers are already built that way. That's why you have people who talk about, hey, I'm going to do my computer build. As that's the parts are things that are sold on by different manufacturers. You bring them in, you put them together, and now you have your working computer. And the thing is, there are laptops that are built in that same way, and like I said, there are smartphones that are built in that way. But the American market, and to a lesser extent the external market, is locked in into the people that have the most advertising bucks, to let you know that, hey, we have these, we've got a new one, you should trash your old one and buy this new one. Well, why? Because eventually we're going to update the firmware so that this one that you have doesn't work anymore. I mean, that's not what they're going to actually say. They're going to say, have the newest and coolest thing, be the cool guy on the block. If that's uh, I mean, if you fall for that, you're playing into some very negative patterns that will leave you poor over time. Just saying. Anyway, all of that said, that was the thing that I wanted to comment on. Went off in a number of directions there, but hey, that's where these conversations go. Anywho, I am going to sign off now. Thank you for taking the time to hear me rhyme. This has been Red Coat.